On this edition of Early Look, I'm going to be previewing the UFC Oklahoma City main event taking place July 18th between former middleweight champion Dricus Du Plessis and former welterweight champion Kamaru Usman. My name is James Lynch. If you've watched the show before, you know that I'm going to go through a bunch of different stats and intangibles, and then at the end, I'm going to give you my prediction for this fight. After you're done watching the video, let me know in the comments your prediction for this fight. Would love to hear from you and discuss this fight. This just recently got announced at the time I'm recording this. I do wonder how much notice the fighters have. That's something I'm sure we'll find out here soon. But let's do a quick tail of the tape between these two. DDP is 23-3. Usman is 21-4. 32-39. So big age gap there. 6'1" to 6 feet tall. And they both have a 76-inch reach. So physically very similar. There is an age gap here, obviously. Even experience-wise, both fighters have about the same amount of fights. So let's start first with the former middleweight champion, Dricus Du Plessis, and take a look. And like I always got to mention with these main events, this is a 5-round main event. So that'll be interesting to see, both obviously with championship experience. So Du Plessis is 23-3. He's got 9 knockouts, 11 submissions, and 3 decisions. He's currently ranked number 2 in the middleweight division on the meta rankings, and he's currently ranked number 2 on the UFC media rankings as well. Mentioned it there, 32 years old, 6'1" with a 76-inch reach. So he'll be 7 years younger and have a 1-inch height advantage in this fight. He's the former middleweight champion. He had 2 successful title defenses. The first South African fighter to win a UFC championship. He's got performance of the night 2 times and fight of the night 2 times. Did not have an amateur debut, went straight to the pros way back in July of 2013. Made that UFC debut coming over from KFW and EFC back in October of 2020. Du Plessis is 8-1 in the UFC. He's got 4 stoppage wins. Some notable wins include Brad Tavares, Darren Till, Derek Brunson, Robert Whittaker. 2 wins over Sean Strickland and Israel Adesanya. His only loss in the UFC is against previously undefeated Khamzat Chimaev. DDP's had a couple layoffs throughout his career. Let's go through some of them there. Going from Trevin Giles to Brad Tavares, there was a 357-day layoff. Going from Sean Strickland to Khamzat Chimaev, there was a 220-day layoff, and then going from Chimaev to Usman will be a 336-day layoff. So this will be a one of the longer layoffs he's had throughout his career. Second longest, actually, since the Giles to Tavares one. So something to keep in mind when you're looking at this fight is a little bit of a layoff for DDP coming into this one. And remember, we didn't hear much from him after that loss to Chimaev, so that's something interesting to keep in mind. DDP has fought in different weight classes. I think that's worth noting because Usman's moving up. So DDP's actually fought 4 times at welterweight. He's fought 20 times at middleweight, and he had 1 catchweight fight in his career at 176. So not like the biggest middleweight, but obviously someone that has made welterweight in the past. Dricus Du Plessis has had 1 close fight of note. That's the Toronto fight that he beat Sean Strickland in. That was back in January of 2024. If you go look at the media scorecards for that one on MMAdecisions.com, 13 media members scored the fight for Dricus Du Plessis, 10 scored it for Sean Strickland. So bit of a closer one. And then obviously in the rematch, DDP decisively beat Sean Strickland, although we found out after the fact Strickland was dealing with a shoulder injury. Let's go look at the stats here for Dricus Du Plessis as we take a quick look. And you'll see that his significant strike accuracy, significant strikes landed per minute is 5.18. His striking accuracy is at 48%. His significant striking defense is at 52%, so he does get hit a bit. Takedown defense is at 34%, primarily for the Chimaev fight. His takedown average is 2.22. His takedown accuracy is at 51%, and his sub-average is 0.7. He does have some submission wins. And if we look at the Chimaev fight, Chimaev was able to get 12 takedowns in that fight. DDP got 1 of his own. But that's a glaring stat, and it will play a role in this fight, as we'll talk about a little bit later here. Also losing these significant strikes, 37-13. Chimaev actually landed 529 strikes, just 45 strikes for Dricus Du Plessis. So a very one-sided fight that DDP is coming off of. Now let's take a look at the former welterweight champion Kamaru Usman as he steps up to the middleweight division yet again. I mentioned it there, 21-4 record. He's got 9 knockouts, 1 submission, and 11 decisions. He's currently ranked number 10 in the media rankings for the UFC. Somehow Joaquin Buckley is actually ranked number 9, which doesn't make any sense to me, with Usman beating Buckley in his last fight. Then if you look on the meta rankings, they have him ranked at number 9 and Buckley's ranked at number 10. So meta actually had the better rankings for this one. Mention it there. He's 39 years old, 6 feet tall with a 76-inch reach. No major advantages there. He was the Ultimate Fighter Season 21 winner. Looked on his Instagram. It looks like he is training at Onk Sports, which is Trevor Whitman's gym in Colorado. He's the former welterweight champion who had 5 successful title defenses. He's had performance of the night 4 times and fight of the night 2 times. Did not have an amateur debut. Went straight to the pros way back in November of 2012. Made that UFC debut coming off the Ultimate Fighter back in July of 2015. So over a decade ago. He is 16-3 in the UFC. He's got 5 stoppage victories. Some notable wins include Leon Edwards, Sean Strickland, Damian Maia, Rafa dos Anjos, Tyron Woodley, 2 wins over Colby Covington, Gilbert Burns, 2 wins over Jorge Masvidal, and Joaquin Buckley. Some notable losses include 2 losses to Leon Edwards and a loss to Khamzat Chimaev at middleweight. So not, 3 losses in the UFC, not too shabby. He's had a couple layoffs. Let's talk about those. Going from Chimaev to Buckley, there was a 602-day layoff. Remember, he missed all of 2024, so that was pretty significant. And then going into this fight, there'll be a 399-day layoff. So it's the second longest layoff of his career. So Usman's actually got the longer layoff coming into this fight than DDP, with him fighting in June as opposed to DDP fighting in August. So something to keep in mind there. He's had a couple close fights. I mean, the first Covington fight was close prior to the finish. The second Covington fight wasn't close. 18 media members scored the fight for Usman, 3 scored it a draw. The third Edwards fight that he lost by decision, a majority decision loss. If you look at the media scorecards for that one, 19 media members scored the fight for Leon, 11 scored it a draw, and 2 scored it for Usman. And then the Chimaev fight that he had, which was also majority decision loss back in October of 2023, 21 media members scored the fight for Chimaev, 4 scored it a draw, and 4 scored it for Usman. So something to keep in mind there. Let's look at Usman's stats. Usman coming in at 4.16 significant strikes landed per minute, so that is lower than DDP's. His striking defense is at 55%. DDP's is at 52%. Striking accuracy is at 51%. Takedown average is 2.79. Takedown accuracy is at 44%. His takedown defense is at 89%. See if DDP shoots for any takedowns. And his sub average is 0.1. Let's go take a look at the odds. We actually don't have odds on bestfightpicks.com. I did a quick search on X and found out that looks like Bet99 has Du Plessis at about a -290 favorite, Usman +220, no complaints there. On Tapology, if we go look at the fan voting here, you'll see they are favoring DDP, 83% to 17, so pretty significant there. Majority of people 40.5% picking DDP by decision, 58.4% taking him by KO TKO, and just 1% taking him by submission. Usman, the people that are picking him, 93% are picking him by decision, and just 5.6% by KO TKO. All right, which way AI, got to remember AI as well. Pretty significant here. They have him at 69.36% for Du Plessis, 30.64% for Usman. Again, I could do an AI predicts video and give you all the stats and in-depth stuff if you guys want for the Oklahoma City card. But again, they are favoring DDP as well. Okay, so which way am I leaning on this one? This one's interesting because of the style matchup, right? With Usman, obviously having a lot of success with the wrestling against Buckley and sort of out grappling him there in the last fight. So, and you saw DDP get taken down 12 times. So the style matchup makes this interesting. But with all that said, I've got to pick Dricus Du Plessis in this fight, and I'm going to take him by decision. And there's a couple of reasons for that. So first and foremost, I think something that people may or maybe might not be looking at that much, but I think going from Buckley to DDP is a huge jump up. Now, obviously, Usman's been in the cage with some of the best, including Chimaev. They have that common opponent. But I think people overrate that win over Buckley a little bit too much, because we saw Buckley go out there after that, after losing to Usman, which was, again, a one-sided fight. And keep in mind, Usman was the underdog in that fight, so it was a big win for him. But Buckley got completely destroyed by Sean Brady the fight after. So I think that speaks more to how Buckley isn't really a contender in the weight class. And, again, his 2 best wins are 2 older guys in Thompson and Covington, than it is about Usman being this force still at age 39. So I just think that's interesting, going from Buckley to DDP. So that's the first one. The other thing is obviously Usman moving up to 85. Has it been enough time for him to bulk up? Is that, is he staying here? I think those questions need to be answered. They are sort of the same height and reach and all that. And I did mention that DDP used to fight at welterweight. So I don't think it's going to be a huge advantage, but it is something worth noting. The big thing for me, though, is the age gap here. Dricus Du Plessis is 7 years younger than Kamaru Usman. I think that will be a big factor in this fight. We're not talking a couple years. We're talking 7 years. So you could argue DDP's in his prime right now. Usman probably past his prime. Not to mention the amount of damage that Usman's taken in his fights. And I'd also imagine that DDP being at 85, you'd have to think he's a little bit stronger than Usman is, but that's just sort of a guess there. Now, if you look at DDP's wins, 48% are by submission, 39% are by knockout. But the stats don't really favor a finish here when you look at the fact that Usman has been submitted 1 time. It was in his second pro fight against Jose Caceres. And then his only knockout, I don't want to call it a fluke, but it was a late finish on that Leon Edwards got. And Edwards is not really known for knocking his opponents out, and Usman just made a mistake and got, it paid for it. So I don't really think we'll see a DDP finish here. Again, the last finish he had was 2023 against Robert Whittaker. So I'm not thinking finish here. That's why I'm leaning more towards decision. I know the stats don't back up a decision here. Just 13% of his wins are by decision. But his last 2 decision wins are against guys that are pretty, well, they're both against Sean Strickland, who I would argue is durable just like Kamaru Usman is. So that's something to keep in mind. And again, Usman's gone the 5 rounds before. He has that championship experience. So I don't think he'll gas out, and DDP could take advantage there as well. So there's 2 big concerns with picking DDP here that I think are worth acknowledging. Number 1 is obviously the style matchup. I talked about it there. Khamzat Chimaev took down Dricus Du Plessis 12 times. Usman's a good wrestler. He has a collegiate wrestling background. That is a bit concerning as far as the style matchup. So that is one thing you have to keep in mind, even if you are picking DDP here. DDP just got 1 takedown in Chimaev, and the strikes were in a difference there. The other thing that we got to look at too is how is DDP going to handle this loss? Now, he's lost before, but you have to go all the way back to October of 2018, the last time he lost a fight, and that was in KSW. How will he handle this? Because it wasn't just that he lost to Chimaev. Frankly, it was a one-sided fight, and he kind of got embarrassed in that fight. So I do wonder with certain fighters how they come back from losses like that, right? People knew it was going to be close going in, but DDP was favored. I don't even know what the odds were in that fight, but I believe he was favored against Chimaev. No, actually, he was an underdog, so I take that back. But my point is, I do wonder, like we just saw this with Ilia Topuria, like how is he going to bounce back from the loss to Gaethje? I do wonder how DDP is going to bounce back, because one thing we didn't see from DDP after the losses, didn't really do much media. We didn't hear much about him. You know, has he lost a bit of swagger because of that loss? That's something to consider in this fight. So I only bring this up because like I don't think it's like a clear-cut 100% DDP is going to win this fight. I just want to bring that up. Now, another concern here in this fight is that Usman's only fought once since 2024. Remember, he took all of 2024 off. Fought a couple times in 2023, right? He fought Chimaev and then fought Edwards that year. Then he fought in 2022 only 1 time, and then fought a couple times, 3 times in 2021. My point is, for an older fighter to be this inactive, that is a bit of a red flag there. Something to keep in mind. And one other thing I'll point out, because I already see people mentioning this in the comments. So comparing opponents, I think, is a very, what's the polite way I can say this? I don't think it's going to play much of a role in this fight. So there will be people, I had someone in my comments when I did a news video on this fight being like, well, Usman beat Sean Strickland. You know, that's a good win, right? That win was back in April of 2017 when Strickland was fighting at welterweight. To me, that has nothing to do with this fight. And DDP also had 2 wins over Strickland. They were closer. Usman had a more decisive win over Strickland than DDP did, but to me, that's irrelevant. 2 different weight classes, fighters are better, different, all that stuff. So there's that one. But the one that people are really going to hone in on this fight is the fact that, well, Usman had a close fight with Chimaev, which he did. I'm not going to deny that. It was a very close fight. And meanwhile, Dricus Du Plessis had a very one-sided fight where it was one-sided for Chimaev. But that fight was almost 3 years ago that Usman had. And Usman also took that on short notice where, let's be honest, he didn't have a lot to lose in that fight. He was moving up a weight class. It was a switch up an opponent for Chimaev, right? So I don't think you can compare the two. Yes, DDP had a full camp for Chimaev, but I feel like that Chimaev that DDP fought was a much better Chimaev than the Chimaev that fought Usman. Because again, there was no opponent switch ups. It was a bit short notice, all that stuff. And I think, again, Usman just performed well, but I don't know if that Usman exists anymore back in 2023. He looked good against Buckley, but again, I think that speaks more to how not good Buckley is than how good Usman is. So there's that. And the last thing I'll mention here, I think there's a fair argument that Usman's past his prime, even though he did look good in that fight with Buckley. But I think DDP is in his prime right now, and I think that's something you just can't compare. Again, DDP's 32. He's right in the prime of his career. I don't think you can argue that Chimaev or that Usman is in the prime of his career close to 40. So yeah, I'm going DDP by decision. I think he gets it done. I think he might not look as good as we want him to look, but I think he'll win like a clear-cut decision. Not like a dominant decision, but I think it'll be clear-cut. I think he can keep this on the feet, mix up the striking. I think his striking will be a little bit better. I think he can stuff some takedowns. I don't think Usman is going to be as fast and as strong as a Chimaev is, so I think it's a little bit different. Again, the style matchup is a bit of a concern, but I think overall DDP will be able to get it done by decision. So I'm taking DDP by decision on this one. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. What is your prediction? Who are you picking? Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. Appreciate you tuning in. This is another edition of Early Look. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe button on the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.